Our reading today from the Gospel, according to Mark, is both moving and disturbing. Filled with characters depicted in great contrast and drama, the nature of this short and stark narrative has served as inspiration for the arts in both the ancient and modern world. The daughter of Herodias, often referred to as Salome, has been represented in paintings by Da Vinci and other masters, an opera by Richard Strauss, a play by Oscar Wilde, numerous songs, including one I had sent to me this week by YouTube, poetry, film, even a video game. The lust, seduction, power, ambition, scandal, and murder have provided endless artistic imagination. One of the rare gospel readings throughout our lectionary that does not focus on Jesus, Mark places this story of the execution of John the Baptist between two accounts of Jesus and the mission of the 12. The first, just prior to today's narrative and read last week. Here Jesus commissioned the disciples and sent them into villages to stay in willing households and build the movement by healing and proclamation. Immediately following today's reading, we find the disciples returning, gathering around Jesus and telling him all they have done and taught. Between these two related and favorable stories of the work of Jesus and his disciples, Mark inserts Herod and his views on Jesus, which then lead into a retrospective of the death of John the Baptist. Why put this story in the middle of the commissioning of the 12 and their return? Just as John is a forerunner of Jesus, his violent death points to the fate that awaits Jesus. For Mark, it is Jesus who is the central figure. John's ministry, says Mark, was the beginning of the good news of Jesus Christ. And even though this story is about the death of John the Baptist, Mark wants his readers to think about Jesus. According to one commentary, positioning the stories in this way, Mark invites his readers to compare two different types of discipleship. First, the discipleship of the 12 who reach out and preach and proclaim and heal. That sounds good. Secondly, we have the discipleship of John with his imprisonment, suffering, and death. Suffering is not something we readily choose or seek out, but we all know suffering is definitely a reality in our world. We have to go no further than today's news headlines, where the extremely troubling and shocking stories involving children and other innocents serve to not only outrage, but shake us from what we had believed to be a civilized world. Although Jesus is not highlighted in this reading, he is the key to understanding this story, which appears in Mark's gospel at the very point where the Lord's fame and success is growing exponentially. John's determination to speak the truth to power brings his destruction, and we know that it will be no different for Jesus. Flannery O'Connor has said, "There is a moment in every story in which the presence of grace can be felt as it waits to be accepted or rejected, even though the reader may not recognize this moment." I admit to having a hard time finding any grace in this troubling passage from Mark until a former drill sergeant and fellow student at the School of Deacons told me where he unexpectedly found grace. In a place not highlighted in the plays or the operas or the grand paintings, he found grace at the very end of this account, in the poignant, short, and solemn description of disciples picking up and claiming John's body. For Mike, grace was catching a glimpse of John's disciples showing up and performing a costly and inconvenient act together. How might we as disciples show up, gather, confront, and perform acts of service together in our community? Not limited to remembering the dead, we must together face down causes of death, the death resulting from hunger, loneliness, homelessness, violence. Just this past week, we have witnessed the unfolding story of the costly rescue of that soccer team and coach in Thailand. It took courage, skill, trust, but most importantly, teamwork for both the rescuers and those being rescued. During this season of Pentecost, we have heard wonderful sermons from Father Daniel, where he has challenged us to pursue and establish practices of discipleship, practices of prayer, gratitude, planting seeds of hope, and developing patience like the deep roots of a sequoia. The roots of our own sempervirens, coastal cousins to the Sequoia giganteum, have roots that branch out laterally, reaching out over 50 feet in order to link with neighboring trees, creating strength to withstand powerful winds and floods, thus providing another metaphor for us as followers of Jesus and our need to reach out and support each other. There is very little room in today's reading for an apathetic response. Given our current world situation, should we just be content in making sure our own personal peace, privilege, and affluence remain intact while ignoring the huge impact this has on others? No. We are forced to together respond to a world repeatedly in opposition to the innocent, a place where injustice seems to prevail. And it is here we will find ourselves in a space which we are compelled to join in that suffering rather than looking for ways to escape it. Our lives are filled with choices. Herod chose loyalty to his kingdom and the power it afforded him. He presided over a banquet of death. Jesus calls us to belong to him, speaking the truth, working as best we can to bring justice for all, and living lives of compassion and concern for those in need. Jesus calls us to live beyond ourselves. John is dead. But the good news is that the work of God will continue. With Jesus, it is not just despite his own death, but also through it that the work continues. We can go forward together in the confidence that God is God. His work goes on. Love will triumph, and his kingdom will come. Every Sunday we conclude our service not by saying, "Send me," but by praying together, "Send us now into the world in peace, and grant us strength and courage to love and serve you with gladness and singleness of heart. Together, let us strive to do so with God's help.